Welcome to the Top Order podcast, live from Auckland this evening on a wet and windy Thursday. We're going to talk some New Zealand, Sri Lanka, the collapse, the fallout, and is Kamindu Mendis the new Don Bradman? India do it again inside 2.5 days. More Jasprit Bumrah love, really, from the podcast. Jadeja also joins the 300 plus 3,000 club. Women's T20 World Cup. Can anyone challenge the Canary Yellow? And we'll talk a little bit of expectations for England, Pakistan's Test Series as well. All coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Yep. Well, last week, I think, opened the show saying we're a New Zealand cricket podcast, so we'll have to start with New Zealand cricket. We're going to have to do the same again, aren't we, this week? And yeah, look.
Well, we don't have to, but I guess we probably should. We don't shy away from the tough questions here at the Top Order, do we?
There's more long faces there than a Brendan McCullum stud farm. Not a great outing, I guess, for the Black Caps against Sri Lanka. The Slack channel was, full of woe and remorse.
Well, it was actually full of Raj saying Sri Lanka's in quite a good position now.
I was just reaffirming their position, and they were in quite a good position for pretty much that whole Test match.
They were. Were you going to lead into a question, or should we just continue our woes?
Well, look, I guess the question I want to open with, we talked last week about expectation of you as a New Zealand, or you guys as New Zealand fans. And you, I think both said you expected to win a series away from home against Sri Lanka. We had a little bit of vigorous debate. Baldy's, had a little bit of a chat around the language that you used, around perhaps some of those preemptive excuses. But in hindsight, you still expect to win that series when you see how comprehensive, I guess, that performance was from Sri Lanka, taking nothing away from them in that second Test match?
I was probably more in the we need to put out a good performance. I was, probably thinking back to I think the last time we were in Sri Lanka, it was 1-1, and that's probably where my expectations were about this series. But I think it was more around, I think we should feel like we can win this series. And certainly in that first game, I thought we should have won that test. We talked at length last week about how it was a big missed opportunity for New Zealand. But, I mean, it just all went to custard in this game. And I think the most disappointing part for me was that it was, we talked about all the things we could potentially, if we wanted to, have used as excuses last game. This time, it was all on ourselves. There were missed opportunities. We could have had Sri Lanka 10 for 2, and then it's a completely different game, but we miss a catch. And then it was just calamity after calamity. And then the way that they folded in that first innings, it was just game over and an embarrassing loss, almost immediately.
Yeah, I feel like over the last sort of 12, 18 months, I have said that wasn't, we played badly. Not that, there's a gulf in sort of the skill levels. We didn't have the tools to win there. We just played badly. But I feel like I've said that a lot over the last sort of 12, 18 months. And again, I mean, I'm going to say something similar here. I don't think there is as big a gulf in our skill sets as the scorecard would lead you to believe. If we had taken half of our chances on that first day, and there's no reason, we should be dropping standard catches and the slips, stumpings. These are things that they train for, that they should be doing in their sleep. And I think if we had taken half of those chances, this game would have been a lot closer. But we just kept letting them off the hook again and again and again. I don't think that once that new ball got a bit softer, we actually created a lot of chances with both new balls when we had them.
We had 3 new balls.
When that ball got a little bit...
You don't need to rub it in.
You don't need to rub the third one. When it came to bowling spin through that middle period, I think that we did get dominated a lot, and Sri Lanka really sort of grinded away and got into a great position, and they batted incredibly. But we did have chances on almost all of those batsmen who got away and scored big runs in low numbers, under 20, under 10, some of them in some occasion. And I don't know. I feel like I'm just putting excuses up and again.
I think we've got to give Sri Lanka credit. I mean, we've been quite critical of Sri Lanka over the last couple of years on this podcast for not turning starts and opportunities into big scores. And one of the things they've done in the last 3 Test matches, they've won 3 Test matches in a row now, is that they've turned opportunities for their top six into big scores, and they've turned them into some really, really big scores in this test match. So we've got to give them a lot of credit here. Can I give you guys, you New Zealand fans, a little glimmer of hope here? I think this is not an indicator in my mind of a trend downwards for New Zealand, but this is a blip. And I'll tell you why. In the last 10 years, only one international side has failed to concede 600 prior to this test match, and that was New Zealand. In terms of being dismissed for low scores, New Zealand had the lowest percentage of being dismissed for under 150 in of those major full nations at under 5%. So these two things happening in the same test match, it's almost like a perfect storm of bad stuff happening for the New Zealand team. So I don't think it's as bad as it seems. The worrying part for me is the fundamentals that New Zealand sides always take care of business that they've missed out on in this test match. And they'd probably, to be fair, missed out on, as you said, after the first test, Raj, there were a couple of periods there where New Zealand take one of those two opportunities and they strike and win the test match. So I think that's the only thing concerning for me coming out of this series against Sri Lanka, because now you've got to go to India and it gets even tougher.
It's going to get incredibly tough. And I think we knew that to start with, right? Mm-hmm. We talked last week that, that first test against Sri Lanka, that might be our best chance to win a test for a wee while. We've obviously got England at home after that. They're a tough outfit at the moment as well. So, yeah, this is going to be a tough little period. I think where I would push back on you, and as much as I like to sort of have the glass half full with New Zealand all times, I think this series was a real eye-opener for me in the terms of I think that one performance was a blip, but I think sort of where we are as in our cricket, that wasn't a blip. That I don't think we can now think we can go, if you look back at our last 18 months, I think we've tried to sort of, like Raj said, we've tried to explain away losses to Bangladesh, muddled performances, not winning that test against Australia when we had them in a good position, sort of tying a lot of series at homes, not winning every series at home like we used to. And in a way, there are a lot of, not excuses, but there are a lot of reasons why that happened. We've had this golden generation of players where we've had Southee and Bolt and Williamson and all these players, a lot of them are still there, but, they are on the downswing. So quite a lot of those players are gone. And in a way, it's no great surprise that we're starting to, we don't have this huge pool of players that we can suddenly go, okay, well, we'll just bring in 5 or 6 new world-class players. We're going to have to develop them. And we're starting to do that. We've got Rachin Ravindra, who looks really promising. Glenn Phillips is really, building himself into an international cricketer in all formats. Will O'Rourke looks talented. Ben Sears looks talented. So, there are players coming through. And even below that level, there are some that we might end up talking about in the coming months. But yeah, I just sort of feel like this is where we are at as a side now, and it's going to be really tough in India. And in some ways, I think that sort of frames some of the discussion that we might get to around Southee and all these calls now for enormous change and all these things. I don't know. Take it from there, any of you.
No, I agree with a lot of what you said. As you look at my notes there, Binksy, so trying to steal stuff from me.
No, I'm just trying to link the show effectively, Raj.
I'm actually a little bit darker, if you'll believe it, with the bowling rather than the batting, even though if you look at that scorecard, we really did struggle with the bat.
Always the way in Test cricket, isn't it? Yeah. You get bowled out for 88, blame the bowlers.
Yes. The reason I'm sort of a little bit darker on the batting, a little bit darker on the bowling, talk about the batsmen. Like you said, there's a whole bunch of inexperience there. Kane Williamson, Tom Latham, probably the only ones that have really in that top 6 or 7 possibly had decent time in the subcontinent in Test match conditions. If you have a look at the bowling they faced, of the right arm spinner for Sri Lanka,
Peiris was
the ball he bowled
Nishan,
to Rachin Ravindra in the second innings. I'm not sure if you saw that.
Oh, yeah.
Round the wicket, just dipped into his leg stump and then took the top of middle and off. Like, that's just an experience thing. That's going to get 10 batsmen out of 10 out every time that he bowls that ball. There was some exceptional bowling, exceptional catching, except for the last day. I'm not upset with how we batted there. It's an experience. It's a learning thing. We are in that phase. With the bowling, and I'd like to come on to someone else here, I just don't feel like we have the tools to compete on the subcontinent at the moment. Like, there's always the rhetoric that when we go to the subcontinent, we need to have 2-3 spinners. But I mean, we've got one full-time spinner in that side, and Glenn Phillips, who's doing a great job, along with part-timers. Santner's not there to take wickets. His role is usually there as a holding role, especially playing in New Zealand. That's what he's fallen into. We don't have the tools to compete on the subcontinent, which is a worry to me from a bowling perspective.
I think you've got the tools. I just don't think they played very well. If you have a look at what Ajaz can do in India, he can take all 10 wickets in an innings in India. He can take 13, 14 in a match. I think he has the capability to do well, but I don't think as a group that unit bowled well together in the subcontinent. And I think that's partly an inexperience thing for Ratchin and for Glenn Phillips potentially. I would have expected a lot more from Santner in terms of his ability to build bowling partnerships, keep pressure on, those kinds of things to allow Ajaz to winkle guys out at the other end. I have to say, I don't think Southee was as effective as he would wanted himself to be in that series. It will be his last series by the look of it as captain of that New Zealand side. I hope I'm not spoiling anything for viewers.
Well, it's definitely it's captain. He's stepped down. So.
As captain, I think it calls into question his place in the side going forward for that India series, because I don't think he was as effective as he would want to have been.
Well, he hasn't been for a while.
I've got a bit of a hot take here. I actually think, and we'll come on to selection, New Zealand made no changes going into the second test. I feel we were short a seam bowler. And the reason I say that is we were actually effective with seam bowling. We have this sort of thought process. We went out there and bowled 120 overs of spin. We'll throw spin out there and we'll be fine. We'll manage to get the wickets. It didn't work this time, and the chances that we created, genuine chances, were with that new ball each time we used it.
Yeah, look, I guess it's weird the way in which you approach cricket on the subcontinent as a visiting team. A lot of teams go, right, we now need to find 3 or 4 spinners to go over there, and it's going to spin. This was, I thought, a real new ball wicket. So yeah, Raj, to your point, I think playing that extra seamer, and look, you don't know that necessarily at the toss. You're not necessarily going to, put your hand down on it and go, oh yeah, that'll do a little bit. But you might have
and it did spin,
and it did spin, and the old Shane Warne comment: if it seems, it spins. But I think it's that approach, and I think the teams that have been successful on the subcontinent, I'm thinking, and I'm talking in patches, right? So Australia have found a way to utilise different types of seam bowling. They've got a really, really well-rounded attack, I think, with some genuine pace, but some genuine skill. You look at England, Jimmy Anderson, took him a long time to figure out how he was going to get wickets in India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka, but they've kind of done a really good job, I think, of picking the right balance of seam attack to have a bit more variation than just all right arm over 80 mile an hour. But yeah, the selections, I think, are part of it. And look, I guess we'll come on to the longer term. Southee stepping down isn't a surprise. And look, I said to you guys, and I'm really interested to get your take on this. I said this in the Slack channel. It seems like he was a stopgap. He was never going to be a 30, 40, 50 test match captain following Kane Williamson. He was always keeping the seat warm for someone. And I just wonder whether, notwithstanding the fact that Will O'Rourke is, I think, 23, Ratchin Ravindra is 24 maybe, Glenn Phillips is a little bit older.
Yeah.
So the players do tend to develop a little bit later, I think, in New Zealand, potentially in England to a certain extent as well, although they've thrown some youngsters in, compared with Sri Lanka and India and Pakistan, where they tend to get 18, 19, 20-year-old kids into the team and give them that experience. I wonder whether it's time for a revolution in your cricket rather than evolution. And if you go to a Will Young or you go to Tom Latham as captain, I just wonder whether you actually want to go, do you know what? Let's fast forward half a generation here and see what we've got in that, that sort of emerging talent. And we've got to throw them into a 4-year cycle and see how they go over that period of time. So look, I've found that more as a statement, but it is a question, I think, for you guys as to where now for New Zealand? Steady finishes up, doesn't he? End of the
his contract finishes up.
Contract finishes up, I should say,
at the
end of the New Zealand summer.
Well, I think it's through till the contracting year, which is July or something. But as far as I think it goes past the Champions Trophy, and then we've got some one-day cricket after that, and then I think we don't have any cricket after our summer. I don't think. It's through to the end of the World Test Championship cycle, which we now know we won't be in that final. Yeah. So I think we are all assuming there will be a change at that point, but nobody knows as yet.
So you think Latham's got the gig really just on another stopgap basis until there's a new coach and there's a new direction set potentially? I
mean, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, he's another person who, if you look back through his form, it's not wonderful. He's not, he's been a solid performer for New Zealand. But I think I saw some stat. I can't remember what it was, but it's been, he's got, I think 200s in about his last 40 innings or something. It's a reasonable amount.
Prior to that kind of form slump, we were talking about him as being one of the best opening batters in the world at one point.
Yes,
genuine opening
I think we're a far way away from that now.
Yes, I
unfortunately.
Yes,
and I suppose, I'm not saying it's time to drop him, but
the reality is here, guys, that you've got a whole bunch of players here that are riding the crest of a slump a little bit. I mean, Daryl Mitchell's not in the best form of his career, and he set the world on fire there for a wee while. Conway set the world on fire for a wee while. He's in a bit of a slump. You're relying on Kane Williamson to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and he's at a stage in his career where injury and other bits and pieces are starting to catch up with him a little bit. He's got that contract situation. So there are a lot of mitigating factors here, but you're not putting a team on the field at the moment that is as consistent as we've seen New Zealand teams in the past be. And I think that's the frustrating thing and why it's frustrating from the batting perspective. As far as bowling is concerned, I think we're just going to have to live with the fact that we just said goodbye to 750 test wickets pretty much. Once we start looking at Southee on the way out.
It's about 1,000 because you've got Wagner, Southee and Bolt. If we're thinking Southee's, on the way out.
Exactly, right?
It's not far. Well, it's probably not 1,000, but
it'd be close. It'd be close to 1,000 test wickets, right? And so you don't have the depth that, say, England have or India have coming behind that to fill all of those gaps. And we're just going to have to go with O'Rourke, Sears, Henry, Jamieson, if he's fit, and go, right, those are our guys going forward. And we're going to back them to the hilt. Because I think in O'Rourke and Sears, you've got two likely characters coming up through the ranks. Jamieson could be a difference maker if he's fit. And Matt Henry, we've seen what he can do on the international stage. So there's plenty of reason for optimism, but I think New Zealand in their bowling stocks are going to have to identify the guys that they want and stick with them a little bit.
Yeah. I think also, Lip, you've got to pick a spinner and pick him home and away. I just don't think it does AJ any good to have that expectation of, he's going to perform on the subcontinent when we roll him out once every, 3 series. And he's barely getting, and with all due respect to Plunkett Shield, he's barely getting red ball cricket on surfaces that are going to replicate anything like what he's going to face overseas. I just don't think it's setting up that attack for success.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, on Ajaz, but I mean, he's 36 or something as well. So, you're sort of starting to think about his next, the next generation for our spinners as well. But I mean, I take sort of a different point of view on how the future needs to look for New Zealand. I sort of feel like there are the calls, much like you said, for complete revolution. It's time to just, drop half the side, time to kind of rebuild in the NBA basketball sense where you're trying to line up your next draft pick. But international sport doesn't really work like that. And I actually think that the way that our young players have come through, the ones that have come through successfully have been the ones that have been sort of eased into the game, maybe a little bit slower than some of us around the table might have done with Rachin Ravindra and Glenn Phillips and even, Will O'Rourke, who probably has come up quicker than some of us thought he might. But I think that now, in those players at least, we've got players who feel very, very comfortable at that international level. They are, used to being in a somewhat winning environment around learning from players with a lot of experience. I think if we went the other way and went, okay, well, we're going to forget about winning for the next 2 years and we're just going to pick all of these young guys. We're going to drop Conway and Blundell, who I think had an absolute shocker over there in Sri Lanka in terms of his keeping.
He's had one poor series, though, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think he's been mixed with the bat, but yeah, certainly his keeping, I don't remember it being this bad. And I mean, Blundell, there was a time in that TV coverage where the TV made a highlights package and the caption said, Blundell bad keeping, which I thought it was fair at the time.
It was
because
probably placeholder text that went live with the push of a button.
Yeah, it wasn't good. But yeah, I think that actually, doing that drastic change, it's just not how things work. And I think that it would end up being worse because you throw a bunch of these guys in that either are not ready or maybe they are ready, but they are going to go into an environment where they're going to be asked to be the main players in some of these environments. And I just don't think that helps. I think it's useful to be around Tim Southee and Matt Henry. I mean, Henry's going to, Henry will be there for a few more years, you would have thought. And some of these players, like, if even... Yes, Plunket Shield doesn't necessarily mean everything, but if you look at our Plunket Shield, averages and stuff over the past couple of years, the leaders in all of those are Henry Nichols and Tom Bruce, who's I actually don't, he's probably unfortunate that he's been around when Ross Taylor and a lot of these other guys were around. He didn't maybe get the opportunities he probably deserved from his Plunket Shield performances. But yeah, it's not like there are a whole bunch of young players banging down the door to get opportunities. I think Dean Foxcroft was one that we thought might be someone to go and do that. He had a relatively poor year last year, so it's not like you can say, okay, come in. I mean, Mitch Hay as a young keeper in Canterbury, I think he is someone that is now, if he puts some pressure on this summer, he's someone that can kind of work his way in. Nathan Smith is another one who a lot of people are talking about, just got a New Zealand contract, and maybe he's putting some pressure on that Tim Southee spot. But yeah, I would push back on. I don't think there's any value in just throwing a whole bunch of young kids and saying, go out there and win these tests.
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's wholesale personnel changes. I think it's probably a different voice and a different direction. So look, I'm not saying it's a Bazball conversation, but I think you've got Latham, who has been around. He's going to speak the same language as Williamson and Southee because, yeah, he's a little bit younger, but he's of that, he's of that successful 2019 World Test Championship.
He's only
final
a couple of years
era,
younger. Yeah, he's been in the mix the whole time.
So I almost think it's more the direction and the ethos. And I don't know how you do that. It's a really, really difficult thing to do. You need a couple of strategy days, a few PowerPoints, come up with some values and a slogan.
And as silly as that sounds, as corporate speaking as that sounds, there is some value to that. Going, okay, if we are mathematically, I don't know if we mathematically are out of the World Test Championship. If we are, we should be refocusing for 2027. What do we think that Test team is going to look like to challenge for the trophy in 2027? And I don't know if that's going on. I feel like maybe we're thinking about what the next series is going to look like, what the next summer is going to look like. We might need to look a little bit further ahead. Does that mean wholesale changes? I don't think so. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but a bit more forward planning, I think, is Values Day, as Banksy said.
Yeah, look, on that point, I mean, I completely agree. I guess that's where I think it's got to be somewhere in the middle, like you're really proposing, that, we need to look for the future and go, okay, yes, exactly. What are we going to be? What is the next great New Zealand team going to look like? Who is going to feature? How are we going to build our side? And who is going to be in it? And how can those players learn off these great players that we still do have and push them forward to the next generation?
Are we going to move on and talk a bit of India, Bangladesh, or have we got anything else that you want to cover from I know you've got something you want to cover from a New Zealand perspective, Stu. You've got 17 pages of notes.
Thousands of pages of notes. One thing I will say, because before we probably should give Kamindu as well his flowers, because he was fantastic. But I will say the one thing I think the New Zealand analysts and this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I feel like we need to try and figure something out. We need to get Auckland University, get someone in a study replicating the atmospheric conditions of the subcontinent and sit there flipping coins, because we are absolutely terrible at winning a toss. One away from home. We lost that toss, so we lost both those tosses over in Sri Lanka. And we lost that second toss, and I thought, what is it just feels like we always lose tosses. Am I imagining this? Went back and looked. New Zealand has lost New Zealand out of their last 30 away games, tests, going back to 2015, have only won 10 tosses. You break that down to just, the subcontinent, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and India. We've won 2 out of 13. So, what is going on? How, this has to turn around. And I mean, looking forward to India. I think if we lose those tosses, it's 2.5 days might be too long for some of those games. Kamindu, do you want to talk about Kamindu, Baldy? I know you're a big Kamindu fan.
I'm a massive Kamindu.
Although the fact that I compared him to Bradman might have riled you up a little bit.
I think that's a bloody apt comparison. Absolutely. I mean, he's only behind. I can't remember who it is. I think it's Everton Weeks and Wally Hammond in terms of innings to get to 1,000 runs. He took 13, and I think Weeks and Hammond took 12. It's just an incredible talent. I mean, it remains to be seen if anyone's going to figure him out in international cricket or whether he can continue on like this. But, I mean, as long as he is continuing to score runs, we've got to keep talking about him every time he goes to the crease because, as you say, he is not just a T20 hitter. I mean, a lot of people, when he burst onto the scene, like, oh, he's just a T20 player, goes out and bashes it. But this dude is just piling on run after run after run, and you can't do that unless you're a proper cricketer. He's just exciting to watch. I can't wait to see what he does over the next 2 or 3 years. Brilliant. Absolute box office.
And as you said, Nishan Peiris, I thought was fantastic as a debut game, spun the ball. Yeah, I really liked. They did a really nice breakdown of how he used his front arm, and I won't go into it here because I can already see Binksy's eyes glazing over. But it was very good.
Tell me more.
And how he goes about things. So yeah, looks like someone who I hope we see a bit more of it in the coming tests.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And credit to Sri Lanka. And what I really liked is we don't see many follow-ons in force, do we? So yeah, nice to see.
Well, when you're 500 runs in front, you probably can afford to.
Well, absolutely, and they'd only bowl 40 overs, right? So in that innings, which we won't go into. Let's move over to India, where I think obviously Bazball has really paved the way for this Indian victory, and England obviously reign saving Australia again in this one day series. But no, at the risk of any listeners turning off, look, we've got to give props to India really setting that game up. I think 35 overs or so on the first day, 2 days completely washed out, and then. Yeah,
one of that third day sitting there in the sunshine, wondering why we weren't playing cricket.
But. Yeah, but yes, let's not go into drainage again because that's even more dull than the front arm driving revs. But where do we want to start with this? Yeah, this Indian performance. It seems as if we talk about Ravichandran Ashwin, we talk about Bumrah, we talk about. A bunch of players over and over again, but they keep doing the business for India.
Oh, the intent to score runs and to take the game to Bangladesh in that scenario, just absolutely brilliant. Brilliant captaincy, brilliant planning. Well, not planning because you can't plan for being washed out for 2 days, but taking the game to Bangladesh in the opening, 4 overs where they put on 50, 60 runs.
It's amazing, wasn't it?
Set another world record for fastest to 50, fastest to 100. I think they were fastest to 50, fastest to 100, fastest to 150, fastest to 200.
And 250.
And they would have been fastest to 300 in the history of Test cricket in that innings. Look, absolutely brilliant performance from Jaswal, backed up by Rohit. And again, Rohit, like we saw...
He set the tone, right?
Yeah, like we saw in the World Cup, he was like, I'm prepared to sacrifice myself if I have to set the tone for this team. So look, tremendous captaincy.
First ball, charged down the wicket, hit it for straight 6. Next one, short ball, 6 over square leg. 5th ball, hit it even further straight. It was amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's only the 5th or 6th time in the history of Test cricket that a batter has hit the first 2 balls of their innings for 6.
Gale must be on that list.
No, Gale's not on the list, I don't think. He hit the first ball of a Test for 6.
Yeah.
But I don't think he followed that up with the second one.
Chris Tavares.
There's a guy from England, Duffy did it in the 40s. Tendulkar did it to Lyon in the mid 2000s, and a few others smattered around the place.
Yeah, Tavares was like a boycott player.
Oh, right, okay, so not him. So
it was a niche joke for four people in England. Yeah.
What do you make of 2.5 days forcing a result, though? I mean, I know it's an interesting one because Bangladesh were completely backed into a corner. When India start coming at you like that and you're already 1-0 down in the series, going 2-0 down in the series is less of a repercussion. They had all the sort of choices taken away from them. They needed to sort of try and fight fire with fire, but they couldn't wrest back their momentum. 2.5 days though for a test match.
Yeah, look, we've talked about it quite a lot, about the way that Test cricket has speeded up and putting time back into games and all those kind of comments. And I just think that this was perfectly executed by India. They went out with the intent. They got close enough to the Bangladesh, or close enough to what they thought was going to be somewhere competitive, and then kept going, and then went, right, that's enough. We're going to pull out at this point. And bowled really well. And I guess Bangladesh must have just been really, really shell-shocked going out to bat. And then all of a sudden you're 3 for 30 odd, and you're still behind by 150, 160 or whatever it was at that point.
Yeah,
and then it was just really clinical from there for India. So, look, I don't know.
I've got another hot take.
Were there any betting flags on the game? I don't know. But I'm joking, but ultimately, I think you've just got to give credit to the performance and, sensing an opportunity, and probably also being pretty safe in the knowledge that they had the luxury of the third innings where, if you think about pitch being under covers, it would have dried out when they got to the third day of play or second and a half day of actual play. The wicket would have been at its best. If their gamble in that first innings hadn't have gone, to plan, or Bangladesh had come out and batted really well, they could have then taken time out of the game if they needed to, and it's a draw, and no one said, no one's saying anything else.
Fortunately, depending on how you look at it, this test match is a great argument for 4-day tests, and bringing in test matches that are, a little smaller in time. If they save costs on the individual tests, we know that test match cricket is a large drain on resources for cricketing boards. If it can shorten tours, if it can allow teams to have more pre-tour match preparation in a country that they're going to, why not have a 4-day test if we've got teams that are willing to push the envelope and get a result? Because India could easily just have batted that out and won the series 1-0, no harm, no foul there for them doing that, and they didn't. They decided that they wanted to go out there and chase a result. And if that's the kind of cricket that we're seeing by other powers around the world, like England, for example, there's massive arguments here why 4-day tests are not a good thing.
I think if you're going to have 4-day tests, you have to have the onus on the players to bowl their overs. So I don't think it's going to work if a 4-day test only has 75, 80 overs bowled in a day. If you are genuinely going to bowl a minimum of 90 overs, then I think there is an argument to be made for 4-day tests, but it's a give and take thing as well, right?
I'm glad you said that. So Rohit Sharma said he did not think about runs or anything like that. He thought about how many overs he needed to bowl to Bangladesh to win the game. And if that's the kind of thinking that's going forward, bowlers are going to get through their overs. Areas or parts of the world where you can bowl spin bowling, you can get through more than you need to. We see it, in our local competitions where we're trying to rush through overs to get 2 days worth of cricket in.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I think there's an argument as well for having, 2 speeds, isn't there? That there's an argument that some Test cricket is 4-day Test cricket and other Test cricket is 5-day Test cricket. The only dangerous thing for me is, don't take this game as one game to prove a theory or not. If you get a weather interruption on the 5th day when you're going to have a really exciting game, and you're only going to play 4 days, then that's going to be a shame that you miss out on those kind of opportunities. I think the other thing is, if you do, and look, I agree with you, you've got to cram the overs in. You've got to be able to bowl 100 overs in a day. That then probably has the knock-on effect of, will you see a Mark Wood or a Jofra Archer or a Jasprit Bumrah bowling, being able to bowl 12 overs in a day as part of a 4-man or 5-man attack? You're probably not, because you're actually going to need someone that can bowl 17 to 22 overs in a day. And does that mean you're going to get more, Scott Bolans or someone that's, that kind of old, 80 mile an hour seamer that's just going to keep going. So I think you've got to be really, really careful about what that does if you try and cram a 4-day work week into a 5-day week, which again, it's happening in the corporate world. So it can happen in cricket. But I think they've got to then look at what those potential consequences are, and do they outweigh the mathematics of it? But yeah, it's got to be looked at, I think.
I think, though, your point around the way that India approach the game is kind of hiding the lead, that they can do this because their bowling attack is just so brilliant. Like, they could go out and attack and do that because Rohit Sharma knows he's got these two incredible spinners to call on in the third innings of this game when, it's going to be the fourth and fifth days of a test, which, yes, it's been under covers, but, we expect it to have been worn a little bit. And he's got this absolute cheat code in Jasprit Bumrah that he knows, okay, well, I can... It seems like Rohit Sharma just goes, oh, well, I need a wicket now. So, Jasprit, can you just come on and pick me up a wicket? And he does. Like, he's sort of the only bowler in the world that I look at right now that it feels like he's been brought on to take a wicket, and I know he will because he's just so good. Every time I watch him, I'm sort of amazed by a different part of how he bowls. Sometimes he's seaming it all over the place, swinging it all over the place. In this game, you could see his brain going a million miles an hour, like trying to figure out, okay, well, I'm going to bowl a couple away, and then I'm going to bowl one in, and I'm going to do this. The way he kind of got Mushfiqur in that to pick up the last wicket of Bangladesh's second innings, off cutter through the gate, huge turn through the gate. Mushfiqur was set batter at the time.
So what you're saying is the thing that you like most about Jasprit Bumrah's bowling is his spin,
his off-spin bowling through the gate. Yeah,
just checking.
Yeah. But it's very easy to. It's not very easy to go and win a test in 4 days. When I'm not trying to diminish that, but the way that India's bowling attack is, I think we've talked a bit about Bazball and its success and the way that they've been able to do things at speed. It's been the same thing. The sort of underrated part of being able to play cricket at speed is actually taking those wickets, because it's very easy to go, well, it's not very easy to go out there and smash it and score it 6 and over. But you can do that when you know that you've got a bowling attack that can knock the other side all out in 80 overs or under 80 overs and have a manageable total. It means, like you said, Baldy, that you can go out, or Binksy, whoever said that you can go out and throw caution to the wind because okay, well, if it doesn't quite pay off for us in the way we want it to, we've just got this bowling attack that can knock the other team over, and that makes it so much easier when you're trying to manage a test match.
Yeah. The scary thing for me is probably one of the best equipped teams to play that way is Australia, and they're at the moment reining it in and not going out there and doing that. They've certainly got the, as you would say in Australia, the cattle to go out and do that with your batting lineup, particularly your Travis Heads,
you Mitchell Marshes,
yeah,
Cameron Greens.
I
hate when people talk about that.
This talk of
tell me,
but
how,
you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
How was I supposed to say that?
That was the perfect Australian way to mention those names. Thank you very much.
And then obviously from a bowling perspective, you've got your Pat Cummins,
your Mitchell Starks, your Pat Cumminses, your Hazelwoods.
But I've got the ability to go out and really blitzkrieg it. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that as the World Test Championship final, to be honest. I think
those two teams. I mean, that's how it's shaping up. I mean, Sri Lanka have put themselves in the conversation. I actually think South Africa is probably the one to watch. They're the side that has, on paper, I think the easier fixtures. They've got a couple of series at home against Sri Lanka and Pakistan, I believe, and then maybe go away to Bangladesh. So you could see them running that slate, and actually India and Australia have to take games off each other, don't they, in that border Gavaskar.
May or may not happen. We'll see how we go. India are in pretty good form at the moment.
Yeah. But I mean, anything else from that India game? I love their catching. That catching was fantastic. Rohit's one is going to get a lot of coverage. Siraj's one with the one hand, but I actually love the Jaiswal ones at Galle. Galle fielded there my whole cricketing life, and I know how tough those Galle ones are. So I thought he was brilliant.
It's a market difference from 20 years ago. Those Indian sides that had tremendous names 20 years ago that weren't quite the same fielding standards. India are now world class. Athletically, they are world class across the board. Just a quick mention before we move off that Jadeja moves to the 3,000 run 300 wicket club. So that's a first 11 in there. Is some pretty good names.
We preempted this last week, didn't we, by talking about how underrated he was?
Yeah. So Hadley, Khan, Pollock, Ashwin, Jadeja, Warne, Broad, Botham, Vas, Kapil Dev, and New Zealand's own Dan Vettori are the 11 cricketers with 3,000 runs and 300 wickets. Jadeja's got the second best batting average behind Imran Khan and the fifth best bowling average on that list behind.
He was second fastest to that figure, wasn't he?
And the best facial hair.
And the best hair, probably.
Vettori.
Now, but not in his playing career.
That's true.
So it's, you've got to have it in your playing career. So look, congratulations to him again. Another huge milestone for that Indian juggernaut that keeps rolling on. Can we just cover off another little quick piece of Indian news before we move off to other things? Bit of youth cricket on the Top Order podcast. We don't often get to cover under 19 youth test matches, but
get your black book out.
This is so momentous that even the Murdoch press, the Fox Sports press in Australia, have covered this. So India, not surprisingly, have unearthed another teenage superstar, and I used that word teenager advisedly. So I'm going to correct my pronunciation here, team. But Vaibhaj Suryavanshi clobbered the second fastest youth test century ever, only beaten by Moeen Ali, 58 balls against Australia in this youth test match. He was run out for 104, could have gone on and
criminal. Don't get run out. But he's only 13. He's 13 years old playing against like 18-year-old almost grown men, smashed them all over the park, pace and spin. He becomes, I think, the second or the youngest ever person to record a professional grade century. He's already played in the Ranji Trophy. I think he's like the fourth youngest player ever to play in Ranji Trophy.
It's only the fourth youngest.
Yeah,
he was 12. Yeah. He was 12 when he started.
When he started playing Ranji. Unbelievable, this kid.
If he goes on
tour,
tour,
Harrow bet.
If he goes on tour, he eats free at the hotel buffet, and he only pays 75% of an airfare. That's genius.
Unbelievable batter, left-hander, just smashed Australia. So look, one to look out for. I think he's already on most people's radar.
Opening the batting too.
Yeah.
I think by playing in a youth test match, he's on the radar, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I just want everyone to know that we talked about it here on the Top Order podcast. So
we were across it.
We are across this batting phenomenon. Yet another one from India.
Very good. Shall we talk a little bit more men's cricket, and then we'll finish off with the T20 Women's World Cup? So England-Pakistan is coming up 7th of October. And it's probably some of the off-the-field stuff, isn't it, that's, I know, caught your eye during the course of the week and lit up the Slack channel a little bit. But, yeah, some test matches where the venues have only just been named. I think there's 2 games now in Multan and 1 in Rawalpindi, home of Shoaib Akhtar, the Rawalpindi Express. He won't be playing, but I'm sure he may be at the ground, busting the guns out of a very, very tight white shirt, as he's prone to do now. But yeah,
he'll still get it through, I reckon.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Mad as a badger, isn't he? Yeah. But Lip, it's the off-the-field stuff that's caught your eye, hasn't it? I think Pakistan captaincy changes and all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, I would love. I feel like we have this conversation every time we talk about Pakistan. Honestly, I have to refresh myself about who is their coach and who is their captain, like quite regularly, which I think sort of says it all, really. I mean, I don't really understand. And look, it was really interesting when we actually, years ago now, talked to Wasim Khan about his time in Pakistan. And, that was a fascinating conversation about kind of what goes on behind the scenes and all the boardroom stuff. But I just don't understand why they can't get it together. Like, how surely for Babar Azam and this, steps down from the white ball captaincy, he's announcing it on Twitter, or like, what is going on here?
I had to check the date on the article because it came up on my news feed, and I clicked on it and I went, hang on, is this an old article from this
He's
time?
done this already.
I'm sure this has happened before, and it turns out he has. He's like stepped down twice within a 12-month period of being captain. So I think it's just about the toughest gig in world cricket to captain that Pakistan team, because there's so much expectation from passionate cricket fans around the country and overseas. There's so many challenges just getting them on the field in their home country, trying to bring the disparate kind of parties and everyone together under the one banner doesn't seem to be particularly easy to do. There's administration stuff, there's logistics stuff of, just putting cricket on in Pakistan. So it's so difficult for those guys. And I really feel for their leadership in particular, because it's very, very hard by the sound of it to keep that consistency.
Yeah. And that's been the issue with the venues as well, I think, for this tour. They're getting ready for obviously an ICC tournament, so grounds out of commission and being painted and decorated or whatever you do, and then two games at the same place, and then a game in Rawalpindi as well.
What are you thinking about the on the field stuff, Binksy? Because I mean, if we look through Pakistan's recent results, they haven't been good. Obviously, just lost a home series against Bangladesh. I mean, I know England have lost their most recent test against Sri Lanka at home, but before that had won, five on the bounce. So, we're in pretty good form. Again, looking back to the last time I think England was in Pakistan, didn't they win 3-0 in that series? I feel like you've got to be going into this with quite a bit of confidence that you can do the job, right?
Yeah, look, I think probably where I would differ from your expectations of going to the subcontinent and expecting to win, I expect that Pakistan have got the players to put on a performance, at least one performance, and then in a 3-match series, anything can happen after that. But yes, England will be going in with a degree of confidence. I just hope they're not going in with a little degree of hubris, and I think I mentioned this in the chat to you. From a bowling perspective, they've nailed their colours to the mast a little bit, that they're obviously prepping quite heavily for India at home next year. And then, the Ashes, which is, there's always an Ashes that we're talking about as the next frontier. And for that reason, they've picked some speedsters, if you want to call them that they think are going to succeed on a tour down under. Josh Hull was one of those people. He's withdrawn from the squad with a recurrence or continuation of the injury that he got in that test match. They've not called up a replacement. So, whilst they've got, some bowling stock, Ollie Stone, who I know you rate Lippy, having played a bit of club cricket with him, I think. Matthew Potts, who's kind of come back on the scene after probably a year or so out of the action, and obviously Gus Atkinson. And then they've got the two Durham all-rounders in Stokes and Carr. Stokes won't bowl in this series, apparently, is the news coming out of the camp. And then Chris Wokes, who we've talked a hell of a lot, doesn't have a great record with anything other than the Dukes. And look, I think he will be one of the seamers that has to play, because he gives that balance to the side at number 8 as well. So where I have a little bit of a problem is, we go into potentially an environment where you catch COVID on the plane, you have illness in the camp leading into a game. We're not going to pick probably Jordan Cox is there as the spare batter. So, he gets the Dan Lawrence role of probably mixing the Gatorade for 12 months and then being asked to bowl a bit of off spin.
And open the batting.
And then, look, you wouldn't have thought we're going to play Rayan Ahmed, Jack Leach and Shoaib Bashir. So any kind in the same side. So three spinners. So what that says to me is you have a couple of bits of illness or injury, and you're picking a little bit of a bit part side, or you're asking someone to do something that they don't normally do. A little bit like when Ollie Pope kept wicket, for example. So that's the only thing that I think England have got to perhaps consider leading into this series if they do have any little mishaps on the first few days in Pakistan.
Aside from illness, do you believe you have the artillery there to take 20 wickets? And where do you think that will come from?
Yes, I do. I think I've been mighty impressed with Gus Atkinson, and I think I do think he is a potential 3 format player and a potential however many continents there are player as well. I think he will do well because he is that little bit quicker. He gets a little bit of reverse. I think he is going to be a really, really important bowler for England over the next 5 or 6 years. And then I think, look, Jack Leach won't let you down. We're undoubtedly going to play 2 spinners, you would have thought. I think
that's interesting though, because I feel like the success of Bangladesh in that Pakistan series was built around their seamers.
Yeah.
I think seam has. We think of Pakistan as a nation that is close to India and Bangladesh and all these other, and Sri Lanka, and think spin's going to play a big part, but it doesn't always.
Yeah, doesn't always, but I think that's the balance they'll go in with. I think they'll pick both the Somerset boys in Bashir and Leach. And then, I think it's going to be Chris Wokes that really helps to balance that side with, probably Gus Atkinson. And then the fact that Jamie Smith is good enough to bat, I think good enough to bat 6, 5.5 maybe. I think that really helps as well.
Is that going to muck things up though if Stokes can't bowl? Is that going to, are they going to have to play 5 bowlers and not play?
Well, they've taken Wokes, I feel like.
Yeah, but will he bat 7 then, you think?
Yeah, but they might need to nudge people up.
If they want 3 seamers.
Yeah, if they want 3 seamers, yeah.
Which means someone in that top 6 is going to miss out. It's going to be, it's not going to be Harry Brook, is it?
It's not going to be Joe Root.
It's not going to be Joe Root.
No.
So could it be the fact that Ollie Pope got a big 100 in that England summer as captain, and is now going to potentially be the one that misses out? If they play 5 batters and Smith at 6?
They've got a lot of permutations.
Yeah.
Tricky decision.
Yeah.
Tricky decision for England.
Yeah.
But, and if it's a road, they have to take 5 bowlers, I think. Because you have to take 20 wickets.
Or Root has more of a role with the ball, perhaps.
Yes.
But
you play 1 spinner and Root is your second spinner.
But if it's a road, then someone's going to have to do something Herculean to winkle out 10 pretty obdurate sometimes Pakistan batters. They can be quite quite difficult to dismiss in their home conditions when they get in.
And there have been some super flat wickets there in the past, haven't they?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, but it is exciting. It is exciting. I think there's a lot of chance for people on both sides to sort of stand up and take control of this series. I mean, I'm thinking about this series. I actually don't. I mean, I assume that England's going to put in a great performance and probably be the favourites on the sort of bookmakers' tables there. But I could see them also crumbling a little bit with Pakistan being at home. But I mean, my big question is who is going to help England get those 20 wickets? Shaheen, if you go over to Pakistan, Shaheen has been bowling well with the white ball, but has hardly played any red ball cricket of late. Pakistan in general haven't played many red ball things, and other pitches going to be like State Highway 1, which we've seen.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, what is the England top order going to look like? They could score 500 in a day if it's really that flat.
Yeah, but so could Pakistan, I think, to an extent. We talked and we really liked Syed Shakil when we've talked about him recently. Obviously, Babar, obviously Rizwan. Sarfraz came back in. I don't know whether he'll keep wicket or not. Came back in and did well. Skipper Sham Masood as well. So look, they've got the players. It is just the off the field stuff that hopefully doesn't sort of cause too many problems, but it tends to go in little cycles where it does and really impacts those performances on the field, which is a shame.
I thought back today, I think it was the Australian 2020 World Cup where we really had Pakistan as a real favourite in that tournament. They looked really, really strong, and they had all the tools to go anywhere in the world and win. And then since then, it's just been real destabilisation sort of at the back office level.
Oh, and even now, you look at the lineup and you go, they could put a performance out, but it's starting to feel, I guess 5 years ago, even Pakistan's all for years have had this reputation, right, of, they're a mercurial team. They can put out a performance and beat anyone on their day. I feel like the destabilisation that you just mentioned has got so bad that I don't even have that feeling anymore. I feel like it would be a surprise to me if they put it all together because of the way things are going.
I think they're one of those sides where you'd be comfortable watching them when they're not playing you.
Yes.
And as soon as they're playing you, you're like, oh God, these guys are dangerous, aren't they? But like me as a third party watching this England-Pakistan series, I'm backing England to win both tests. But if they're playing Australia, I'm like, could they potentially win that? Because they are a dangerous side. But can they put it together? Can they do the business?
Awesome. Let's move on and finish up with the 2024 Women's T20 World Cup. Starts today, doesn't it? October the 3rd in the UAE, featuring the much vaunted smart replay system, Paul. You'll be pleased to know 28 cameras available at every ground. But
David Hill from Channel 9 fame. 6 cameras are good, but 29 are better. That was his famous thing, was his 9 cameras are better.
Right, very good.
Some old school references coming on today.
There are, yes. But Bordy, you've got one of your now infamous explainers for us, haven't you?
This is a quick one, mostly because we're sort of 55 minutes into the pod and we don't want people to be here all night. But thanks for staying with us as we get to the 2024 ICC Women's World Cup, T20 World Cup, moved from Bangladesh due to unrest in that country to the United Arab Emirates in October. So it's still going to be hot, even though it's getting into the sort of autumn months in the UAE. So it's going to be sort of 30 degrees and above. I'm told it will spin by reliable sources. So spin could play a factor.
Dew sounds like might play a big factor as well.
Could also as well. So there's going to be some interesting kind of environmental things to work through.
Not and the toss thing as well.
Only if you're Stuart and New Zealand is that going to be
wind resistance on the head side.
I didn't check out the White Ferns away from home toss results. I might do that if I feel aggrieved enough to do it after this World Cup.
Do let us know. Yeah,
right.
I will. Yeah.
I'll give you a different email address to send that one to.
Let's get the logistics out of the way. 10 teams, 2 groups of 5, play each other. Top 2 from each group go into the semis. Winners of those, not surprisingly, go into the final. Winner of the final takes home $2.3 million US. So the most important thing to happen in this T20 World Cup is equal prize money on for the victors, for men and women, for the first time in the history of cricket tournaments. So that is fantastic. Let's have a look at as you would say, Binksy, the runners and the riders. So in Group A, Australia, India, New Zealand.
Not a fun group for New Zealand to be in.
Pakistan and reigning Asia Cup champion Sri Lanka in that group. So not an easy group for New Zealand.
Are they usually called groups of death?
Groups of death. Group B, of course, is all the other teams. So that would be England, the West Indies, South Africa, Bangladesh, and Scotland. So ostensibly an easier group, but it still has...
Scotland had a good men's World Cup, remember?
They did,
yeah.
Yep. But also England, West Indies, South Africa only go into 2 spots, right? All the talk is, can anyone catch Australia? Australia haven't lost since 2018. All of that rhetoric. I will say this is the closest one of these international tournaments has been for quite a while. And you might scoff at me, but I'll tell you this. Australia have lost to South Africa and the West Indies at home recently. They've lost a series to England and they've lost a series to India. So Australia aren't riding a 24, 25 game win streak like they have been in the past. So Australia, I think, is still the firm favourites. They've still got chock full of world beaters. They've still got Elise Perry. They've still got Alyssa Healy. They've still got, they've still got experienced cricketers that live for those big moments and have done it before on the biggest of world stages. But for India and for England in particular, I think they will go into this tournament going, we can tip up Australia in a one-off game because we've got the superpowers to do it. We've got the players, we've got the spinners to be able to do it. I mean, you have a look at how many spinners India have got in their squad. I couldn't name them, but I think there's 8 or 9. Too many to name, but they've got all of the players that they need now in that squad to beat England and Australia. For New Zealand, I wish there was more hope to give you guys, but I think unless Bates, Devine, Kerr have the tournament of their lives and 2 or 3 other players in New Zealand step up against India and step up against Australia, they're going to have to tip up one of those sides to get through the group stage.
I mean, that's the disheartening thing when you look at, you look at how we've been going in general, the results, although, with these warm-up games, we've played all right, we've beat South Africa pretty comprehensively, took England to the last ball to beat us in this last game. Spin, you mentioned spin being a big factor. Spin is sort of New Zealand's strength, I would say, in terms of our bowling at the moment. As you said, runs have been a problem. We're going to need a big series from probably Sophie Devine. That's the one that I would be hanging my hopes on. But
they've dropped her down to 4-2 recently to try and get more out of their engine room. But you're going to need runs from somebody else in that squad on a regular basis to win those. Big games.
We play India, and then Australia in the first two games.
Yeah.
And
it's like your men's World Cup. It's like your men's World Cup. You've got your two hardest games first up, and then it doesn't get any easier from there. But you might be out of the tournament after two games, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Just covering off Group A, I think Pakistan and Sri Lanka will probably also finish in the group stage, although Sri Lanka being Asian Cup champions will take a lot of confidence.
Chamari Atipatu.
Yep, Atipatu and Samar Vikrama at 3 has to score a lot of their runs and has been scoring a lot of runs of late. She made 69 or 70 in the Asian Cup final to win in the game. So they've got to step up and be huge in this tournament if they're going to get out of the group stage. Good news for England, though. They've got a spinning World Cup, and they've got probably the best spinner in the world, in my view.
I think they've also got two good backup spinners as well.
Yep.
Charlie Dean, I don't know whether we'll see her throughout the whole tournament, but Sarah Glenn, the leggy as well. So I think England have actually got three decent spinners who have performed,
and they've got terrific batting up and down the order. And I don't think they fear Australia anymore. I think person for person, girl for girl, up and down that lineup, they'll go in going, I can win against my opposite number. So I think England will play in that final. I think they'll get to the final, and I think they've got a tremendous chance to tip up Australia in that final should Australia get there. But they're going to have to get past the West Indies and South Africa. South Africa have not been playing good cricket of late. I think they're 7 and 21 or 7 out of 21 in their last
33%.
Yeah, in their last is that the form of a finalist? I don't know, but. Cut, lose.
He's really happy with his maths over there.
Yeah. Really brilliant from you, Adam, to do that fraction normalization on the fly. Absolutely first class from you. But have they got, again, like New Zealand, they're going to rely on their top three quite a bit, and players like Chloe Tryon and others are going to have to step up, right? So, and they're going to have to get past the West Indies. And anytime you've got the world boss in your team, then you're going to go well. So Dotton is back for the West Indies. Enough said. They're also in reasonable form. They run 3 out of their last 4 series. Plus, friend of the show, Shane Dietz is the coach for the West Indies. So anytime you've got a friend of the Top Order podcast, you're bound to go well. But look, do they have enough bowling to make inroads is my question. They've got enough batting in Stefani Taylor and Matthews, etc. But do they have enough behind Dotton to really make noise in that tournament? And I think they're the real contenders for that Group B spot.
Do you have a bracket for us?
I can't remember how the semi-finals are going to work out, but I think Australia will win their group. India will finish second. England will win their group, and I have South Africa finishing second in that group. So I think crossover Australia, South Africa semi-final, England, India semi-final. Australia will play England in the final.
That India-England game would, if it pans out that way, would be a cracker.
Absolute cracker. Or a quick tournament too. Will be over in 2.5 weeks. So there's only 23 games, including the final. So it's all to play for.
And in summary, Australia's going to win.
I think they will, but it wouldn't surprise me if England or India lifted the trophy this time around. I think they're contenders.
There you go. You heard it here first. Baldy has backed his own nation.
Amazing. Doesn't happen often.
We'll have to end the podcast.
Yep.
Forever. But no, I think that is it for us on the Top Order podcast this evening. Is good night and God bless from us all here in Auckland. We'll see you on the next episode. See you soon.